It all started during a mundane Tuesday afternoon. I was scrolling through social media, feeling bored with my routine life, when I came across a friend's post about an upcoming alumni reunion. The catch? It wasn't my alumni group. But the venue was just a block away from my office, and curiosity got the better of me. I thought, what's the harm in sneaking in for a bit of fun? After all, how hard could it be to blend in with a group of strangers? It was meant to be harmless, a quick escape from my ordinary life. But little did I know, this innocent decision would spiral into a web of comedic misunderstandings, awkward encounters, and one of the most bizarre nights of my life. It wasn't just about blending in. It became about pretending to be someone else entirely. Walking into the event, I was hit by a wave of nostalgia. Except it wasn't my nostalgia. Everyone seemed to know each other, laughing and exchanging hugs. I tried to stay on the sidelines, hoping to observe before diving in. But of course, fate had other plans. A cheerful man in a navy blue blazer approached me, arms outstretched. "Is that you, Chris? I can't believe it. You haven't changed a bit," he exclaimed. "Chris?" My brain scrambled to process the name. Without thinking, I shook his hand and said, "It's been too long." And just like that, I was Chris. Once you start a lie, there's no turning back. I quickly learned that Chris was a bit of a mystery to most people there, someone who had dropped off the radar years ago. That worked to my advantage. I leaned into vague answers like, "Oh, just keeping busy," or "Life has been an adventure." But then came the questions I didn't anticipate. "Do you still play guitar? You were the best at it." Guitar? I hadn't touched one since middle school. Yet I nodded enthusiastically, blurting out, "Absolutely, still my favorite pastime." From that moment on, I was locked into a persona I didn't fully understand. As if the universe was testing me, the host announced a surprise talent showcase to relive the good old days. "Chris, we have to see you play again," someone yelled. My heart sank. How could I possibly fake this? Desperately, I scanned the room escape route, but it was too late. A guitar was thrust into my hands, and all eyes were on me. What followed was a performance so bad it was almost artistic. I strummed random chords, closed my eyes as if lost in the music, and prayed for the nightmare to end. As the night progressed, I thought I had dodged the worst of it, until the real Chris showed up. I froze as he entered the room, looking around with a puzzled expression. "Hey, everyone. Sorry I'm late," he called out. Panic set in. I tried to blend into the crowd, but it was useless. Someone pointed at me and said, "Wait a minute. Who's this guy?" All eyes turned to me, and the real Chris stared at me with a mix of confusion and amusement. The room fell silent as everyone stared at me, and I could feel my heart pounding like a drum. The real Chris walked toward me, his eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. My mouth went dry, and for a moment I considered making up another lie. But what could I possibly say? Instead, I blurted out, "Okay, look, this isn't what it seems. I just thought this was a cool event, and I got carried away." My confession was met with gasps, laughter, and a few raised eyebrows. The real Chris tilted his head, clearly trying to make sense of the absurd situation. To my surprise, the room erupted into laughter, not the mocking kind, but the kind that signals relief and amusement. One of the guests said, "You've got guts, I'll give you that." Another chimed in, "I haven't laughed this hard in years." The real Chris crossed his arms, a faint smile forming on his lips. "So you just decided to crash my reunion and pretend to be me?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded sheepishly, feeling both embarrassed and oddly relieved that no one seemed genuinely angry. I took a deep breath and decided to come clean. "Look, I know this is crazy. I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I saw the invitation, and why not? My life's been kind of boring lately, and I just wanted to feel like I belonged somewhere, even if it wasn't real." My words hung in the air for a moment before an older woman said, "We've all been there, haven't we? Trying to escape our own lives for a while?" A few people nodded in agreement, and I realized I wasn't the only one who had ever felt like this. Chris chuckled and said, "Well, if nothing else, you've made this reunion unforgettable." He glanced at the guitar still in my hands and added, "And hey, that performance? Legendary." The crowd laughed again, and I felt the weight of my embarrassment lifting, replaced by a strange sense of camaraderie. To my shock, Chris then turned to the host and said, "Why don't we let him stay? He's already part of the story now." The room buzzed with agreement, and just like that, I went from an uninvited imposter to an honorary guest. What followed was one of the most memorable nights of my life. I got to hear incredible stories, laugh until my sides hurt, and even join in on a group photo. People kept joking about the fake Chris and asking me to sign their napkins as a joke. For a brief moment, I felt like I belonged, even though it wasn't my reunion. It was a reminder that sometimes, even in the most unexpected situations, connections can form in the strangest ways. The next morning, I woke up with a mix of embarrassment and fondness. I couldn't stop thinking about how absurd the whole night had been. I even checked my phone to see if any of them had sent me a message or tagged me in a post. Surprisingly, a few of them had. "Great meeting you, Chris. Hope we cross paths again," one message read. It made me realize that even though I'd lied my way in, the connections I'd made were real. Looking back, I realized how much that night taught me. It wasn't just about the laughs or the ridiculousness of the situation. It was about understanding how much I craved connection and belonging. Maybe we all do, in our own ways. It's funny how pretending to be someone else made me discover more about myself. I wouldn't recommend anyone crash an event like I did, but I can't deny that it changed me for the better. A few weeks later, I decided to write a letter to the real Chris. It wasn't easy putting my thoughts into words, but I wanted to express my gratitude for how gracious he had been that night. I apologized for my intrusion and thanked him for showing such kindness in the face of my ridiculous actions. In the letter I wrote, "You probably didn't realize it, but your understanding made a big impact on me. That night reminded me that people are more forgiving than I give them credit for, and sometimes we all just need to laugh at life's absurdities." I wasn't sure if I'd hear back, but sending it felt like closing a chapter, a funny, ridiculous chapter, but one that meant more to me than I initially realized. To my surprise, I received a response from Chris a couple of weeks later. His letter was short but thoughtful. He wrote, "Thanks for the laugh and the honesty. You made that night unforgettable for all of us. Next time, just ask. You're welcome at any event of mine." Reading those words, I felt a sense of validation. Despite how ridiculous the situation had been, it had somehow turned into a story of kindness, understanding, and second chances. Now, years later, I still think about that night. It's a story I've told countless times to friends and family, and each time it gets a little funnier, a little more unbelievable. But beyond the humor, it's a reminder of how unpredictable life can be. Sometimes, the most awkward, embarrassing moments end up teaching us the most. They remind us that it's okay to make mistakes, to laugh at ourselves, and to find connection in the strangest ways. As I finish telling this story, I hope it brings you the same laughter it's brought me, and maybe even inspires you to step out of your comfort zone, though hopefully not by pretending to be someone else.